Hey guys, tonight we are going back, way back, before Rome, before even the famous Greeks, to a time when a small city on a riverbank decided it wanted to own the world. Imagine the sun isn't just warm, it's a physical weight pressing down on you. The air tastes of dust, roasted lamb, and the sharp, earthy scent of the river Tigris. This is ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, and tonight, we're visiting its most formidable students of power, the Assyrians. This isn't a history for the faint of heart. The people we're about to meet were brilliant, pious, and terrifyingly efficient. Frankly, if you were dropped into their world, you probably wouldn't survive the first week. No pressure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love seeing where you're all tuning in from. So drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story doesn't begin in a grand palace or on a bloody battlefield. It starts much quieter, around the year 2000 BCE, in a city called Ashur. You are standing on a limestone bluff on the west bank of the mighty Tigris River. Below you, the water moves like a coiled serpent, brown and powerful, breathing life into the otherwise parched landscape. The city itself is a maze of packed earth houses, huddled together as if for warmth, their flat roofs providing a precious extra living space in the cool evenings. A hulking ziggurat, a stepped pyramid dedicated to the city's patron god, dominates the skyline, a constant reminder of who is truly in charge, and that God's name is Ashur. In fact, your city is named Ashur. Your people call themselves Assyrians, and your chief god is Ashur. It's a holy trinity of identity, a closed loop of faith and place that will one day justify conquering the world in his name. But that day is a long way off. For now, Ashur is not a feared military power. It is a bustling, gloriously greedy trading hub. Your childhood isn't spent learning swordplay. It's spent learning accounting. The squiggles you practice pressing into wet clay tablets with a reed stylus aren't poetry. They are the building blocks of commerce. Cuneiform symbols for textiles, tin, silver, and the all-important overdue payment. Your family, like most influential families in Ashur, is in the trade business. Power here isn't measured by the size of an army, but by the weight of silver in your storeroom and the number of donkey caravans you have on the road. Living in a mud brick house is cozy. Right up until the one rainy season, it decides to return to its natural state. You learn that your city is strategically placed, but the rich farmland of the south has the grain, the mountains of Anatolia to the north have the metals. Assyria has the one thing that connects them: the river and the sheer audacity to build a business empire on it. Every day, you watch the caravans arrive and depart. Donkeys laden with fine Babylonian textiles move north, while others return from the mountains groaning under the weight of Anatolian silver and copper. The air hums with a dozen languages, the clang of a metalsmith's hammer, and the less than romantic smell of donkey droppings. One of the quirky things you learn as a merchant's apprentice is how to seal a contract. When a deal is struck, all the terms are inscribed on a fresh clay tablet. Then, something peculiar happens. That tablet is wrapped in a thin layer of more clay, creating an envelope. The terms are written again on the outside, and the whole thing is baked hard. To verify the contract later, you have to physically smash the envelope, revealing the pristine, untampered original inside. It's a brilliantly simple piece of ancient security, and you wonder who first thought of it. Life on the Tigris is a blend of relentless ambition and deep-seated piety. Your city is technically a theocracy. The human ruler is merely the vicegerent, or governor, for the true king, the god Ashur. Every major business deal, every caravan that sets out, is done with a prayer on the lips and an offering at the temple. You grow up with a dual mindset that will come to define your people. Shrewd, pragmatic materialism fused with an unshakable sense of divine purpose. Historians still argue whether the early Assyrians were driven more by a desire for profit or by a deep-seated fear of the chaotic world beyond their city walls. From your vantage point, watching the sun set over the river, it feels like both are true. The world is full of wealth for the taking, but it is also filled with rivals and dangers. For now, The best defense is a good balance sheet. But in the back of your mind, a whisper grows louder with each passing year, a question that will eventually demand a much bloodier answer. What happens when trade is no longer enough? That question of what comes after trade hangs in the air. But for now, you have more pressing concerns. You're leaving. Your apprenticeship is over. And your family has entrusted you with a significant investment of silver to establish a new branch of the family. Business hundreds of miles away in the cold, rocky highlands of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. The journey itself is the first great test. You joined a caravan of nearly 200 donkeys, a slow-moving river of braying animals and watchful guards. The 6-week-long trek is a monotonous blur of dust, sweat, and the constant fear of bandits. You learn to sleep in a tent, to ration water, and to appreciate the profound joy of arriving at a fortified way station for the night. There's no glory in this, just the grim determination of a businessman on a very long commute. It's during this journey that you realize the entire Assyrian enterprise is balanced on the sturdy backs of these surprisingly stubborn little donkeys. Your destination is a city called Kanash. When you finally arrive, you're not allowed into the main city gates of the local Anatolian prince. Instead, you are directed to a sprawling settlement at the base of the city's main mound. This is the Karam, which translates simply to port or key, a rather humble name for what is essentially a slice of Ashur transplanted into foreign soil. It's a bustling, self-governing suburb populated entirely by Assyrian merchants and their families. This is your new home and your new market. The air is thinner and cooler here, a sharp contrast to the oppressive heat of the Tigris Valley. And the local language is a tangled mess of sounds you'll have to learn quickly to negotiate effectively. Your life settles into a new rhythm. You buy a house, set up an office, and get to work. The business model is elegantly simple. The textiles you hauled all the way from offshore are luxury goods here, and the locals pay exorbitant prices for them in silver. But your real cash cow is tin. This is one of history's great arbitrage opportunities. You have access to tin, sourced from the distant mountains of the east, which you transport through Ashur. The local Anatolians have copper in abundance, but no tin. Without tin, they can't make the most important alloy of the age. Bronze, you are the vital link in the chain. You are the dealer of the Bronze Age's most critical ingredient. Historians still puzzle over the exact legal status of the Karam. Was it a colony, a privileged economic zone, or something else entirely? For you, it feels like living in a company town. You live by Assyrian laws. Pray to Ashur and answer to a council of senior Assyrian merchants, all while paying taxes to the local Anatolian ruler for the privilege of being here. The paperwork is staggering. Your days are spent dictating letters and contracts, your fingers constantly smudged with wet clay. One day, a courier arrives with a shipment of tablets from your family back in Oshir. Tucked among the business records is a personal letter from your wife. You crack open the clay envelope to find a scolding. She complains that the last textiles you sent were of poor quality, that a competing family is undercutting her prices, and that you need to stop spending so much on beer with your colleagues and send more silver home for the children's upkeep. It's a strangely touching and deeply human moment, a 4,000-year-old complaint about cash flow and product quality. It sounds like a modern email exchange. These letters, discovered by archaeologists in the thousands, paint an incredibly vivid picture of a society bound together by kinship, credit, and frequent, long-distance. Nagging. Life isn't all work. You socialize with other merchants, sharing meals and grumbling about interest rates. You learn that a small but critical part of your job is diplomacy, keeping the local prince happy with gifts that look a lot like bribes, and ensuring your business practices don't anger the local population. You are an outsider, a guest whose welcome is conditional on the profits you generate for the local elite. There's a quiet tension underlying everything, a knowledge that your prosperity exists at the sufferance of your hosts. For now, the silver flows, the donkey caravans keep moving, and the family business is thriving. You are no warrior, no conqueror. You are something far more subtle, and perhaps more powerful. A vital node in a network that is making your little city of Ashur astonishingly wealthy. But networks can be broken, and the rumblings of a new power rising far to your south, downriver in a place called Babylon, are beginning to reach even your distant Anatolian outpost. The comfortable rhythm of your life in Kanesh, once so reliable, begins to falter. It starts not with a bang, but with a whisper carried on the dusty breath of a caravan master. The whispers are about a king far to the south, in a city you know mostly through trade dockets, Babylon. The name on everyone's lips is Hammurabi. At first, it's just business gossip, another regional power making noise. You and your fellow merchants discuss it over watered-down beer, complaining about how political instability is always bad for the bottom line. You shrug it off. Kings rise and kings fall. The important thing is that the donkeys keep moving. But the whispers grow louder, more urgent. Hammurabi isn't just making noise. He's making conquests. Then comes the news that chills the entire Kurum to its core. The great city of Mari, a vital hub on the Euphrates River and a key partner in your trade network, has fallen to Hammurabi's armies. This is a disaster. It's like hearing that the main shipping port for the entire continent has been seized by a competitor. The flow of tin and textiles is choked off. Contracts are suddenly worthless. Your carefully balanced ledger of credits and debts is thrown into chaos. Panique sets in. You see merchants who have overextended themselves frantically trying to call in loans, their faces pale with the fear of ruin. The donkey-powered internet of the ancient world might be slow, but this news travels with the speed of a desert fire. The shadow of Babylon is long, and it soon falls directly upon your homeland. Ashur itself is now vulnerable. The great Assyrian king, Shamshi-Adad, who had briefly managed to unite the north into a powerful kingdom of his own, is dead. His sons lack his strength, and his kingdom fractures. Hammurabi, ever the opportunist, seizes the moment. He doesn't need to level Ashur. He's more subtle than that. Through a mix of military threat and political maneuvering, your proud city is forced into the city of Ashur, home of the god Ashur, must now pay tribute to a Babylonian king. It's a profound humiliation. From your distant post in Kanesh, you feel the shame like a physical blow. Your entire identity, your privileged position as a citizen of a proud trading power, has been stripped away. This new reality has immediate consequences for you. The local Anatolian princes, who once treated the Assyrian merchant colony with a degree of respect, now see you for what you are. Members of a humbled state. Their tax collectors become more demanding, their guards more arrogant. The delicate web of trust and mutual profit that sustained the Karam for generations begins to tear. Historians still debate the extent of Hammurabi's direct control over Ashur. During this period, whether it was a full-blown occupation or a more hands-off overlordship, but for you, the result is the same. The golden age of the Anatolian trade is over. The risks finally outweigh the rewards. With a heavy heart, you liquidate your assets, pack what you can, and join a caravan heading not north for profit, but south for home. The journey back is a somber affair. You are returning to a city you barely recognize. Ashur is no longer the swaggering, independent hub of commerce you left. It is a city under a foreign thumb. And yet, something else is happening. You and your fellow Assyrians are not just licking your wounds. You are watching. You are learning. You study Hammurabi's methods. You see how he uses not just armies, but also administration to control his vast territory. You hear about his famous code of laws, a pillar of stone inscribed with judgments that bring a brutal, centralized order to his subjects. One quirky but terrifying law you hear about dictates that a tavern owner who serves short measures should be drowned. It's a level of state-enforced discipline that is both horrifying and grimly impressive. You realize that wealth from trade is fleeting. True power, lasting power, is built on military supremacy and absolute centralized control. The Babylonians may be your overlords, but they are also your teachers. You are forced to be patient, to pay your tribute, and swallow your pride. But a new, harder knowledge is taking root in the Assyrian soul. The age of the merchant is ending. The age of the warrior is waiting to be born. A raiding army of a people called the Hittites sweeps down from the Anatolian mountains, the very region where you once traded, and sacks Babylon itself. The great power that had defined your world for a lifetime is shattered. leaving a gaping power vacuum. But for Assyria, it's a case of meat. The new boss, same as the old boss. Into the void stepped a powerful kingdom of horse lords who established their own dominance over northern Mesopotamia. Once again, Ashur finds itself paying tribute, a reluctant cog in someone else's machine. You watch another generation grow up under foreign influence. The lessons learned during the Babylonian era are not forgotten. They are fermenting. The feeling hardens from shame into a cold, pragmatic resolve. Never again. The world is not a marketplace of ideas and goods. It is an arena of wolves, and you have been the sheep for too long. You see the change in the city's posture? The leading families, your old merchant colleagues, begin investing not just in donkey caravans, but in chariots. The finest horses are bred not for speed on the trade routes, but for stamina in battle. The forges that once churned out bronze farming tools now spend more time casting spearheads and the overlapping scales of armor. The sound of the city is changing, from the haggling of traders to the rhythmic clang of hammers on anvils, beating out a new, more menacing rhythm. Then, around the year 1365 BCE, a new ruler ascends the throne in Ashur. His name is Ashur-uballit I, and he is different. He is not content to be the mere governor for a god in a second-rate city. He looks at the kings of Egypt, of the Hittites, of the Kassites, who now rule Babylon, and he sees himself as their equal. In a move of breathtaking audacity, he sends a letter directly to the Pharaoh of Egypt, Akhenaten. He addresses him as brother and complains about not receiving a sufficiently lavish welcome gift on his first diplomatic mission. It's the ancient world's equivalent of sending a passive-aggressive email to the CEO of a rival superpower. This act is a declaration. Assyria is no longer a vassal. It is a player on the world stage. This new attitude is backed by force. Ashur-uballit turns his newly organized army against his overlords. The Mitanni? The campaigns are swift, brutal, and shockingly successful. The Mitanni kingdom, once so formidable, is humbled, and its eastern territories are absorbed. For the first time, your world expands beyond the city walls and its immediate farmlands. You are no longer just a citizen of Ashur. You are a subject of a territorial kingdom. You watch the first columns of defeated soldiers and displaced civilians being marched back through the city gates. This isn't trade. This is conquest. You see Assyrian governors sent out to rule over non-Assyrian towns, imposing the will of Ashur with the sword. Historians still argue whether this initial expansion was a calculated, aggressive power grab or a defensive strategy born from centuries of subjugation. A desperate attempt to create a buffer zone so Assyria would never be vulnerable again. To you, standing in the city square, it feels like the floodgates have opened. The energy is intoxicating and terrifying. A quirky, and rather grim, detail of this new era is how treaties are sealed. When a new territory is brought under control, its local ruler is forced to swear a sacred oath of loyalty. The terms are inscribed on a tablet, and at the end is a long list of graphic curses, calling upon the gods to strike the vassal with every imaginable disease, disaster, and personal failure should he ever break his word. It's a legal document that reads like a horror story, a clear sign that the friendly days of smashing clay envelopes to verify a contract are long gone. This new Assyria is building something larger than a trade network. It's building an empire, one subjugated neighbor at a time. The momentum from Ashur-uballit's conquests creates a new kind of normal. For the first time in your long life, Assyria feels like a major power, a kingdom that matters. You see tribute flowing into Ashur, not out of Italiano. Grandchildren are born who have never known a time when your city answered to a foreign master. It feels stable, permanent even. The letters arriving from distant trade partners are no longer just business. They are reports from a vast, interconnected world of great empires. The Hittites, your old neighbors from the Anatolian highlands, are a superpower. The Egyptians in the south are building their monumental temples. The Mycenaeans across the sea in Greece are trading far and wide. The whole world seems to be locked in an intricate, prosperous, and predictable dance of diplomacy, trade, and occasional, well-mannered warfare. It's the Bronze Age at its absolute zenith, a globalized system held together by palace bureaucracies, international shipping, and a shared sense of elite culture. And then, the world breaks. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a Slomoshian catastrophe, a creeping dread that begins with rumors from the west. Ports have gone silent. A major trading partner in Syria, the city of Ugrit, simply stops responding to messages. You hear panicked tales from sailors about flotillas of strange ships, filled with unknown warriors, appearing on the coasts, burning cities that have stood for 1,000 years. These mysterious marauders are called the Sea Peoples, a name that speaks to their terrifyingly obscure origins. It's like a zombie apocalypse, but with pirates. At first, you dismiss it as coastal trouble, a problem for the great powers with their Mediterranean ports, but the sickness spreads. Next comes the drought. The rains fail, not just for one season, but for season after season. The Tigris, your city's lifeblood, shrinks. The harvests are meager, then catastrophic. The price of grain skyrockets. And for the first time, you see true hunger on the streets of Oshur. The state granaries are opened, but they are not bottomless. Caravans stop arriving, not because of bandits, but because there is simply nothing to trade. The entire economic system, so complex and interdependent, begins to seize up and shut down. The world is starving. Then the refugees begin to trickle in. Ragged families with haunted eyes, speaking of once great cities, now reduced to ash and bone. They tell of the mighty Hittite Empire, the one that sacked Babylon, simply vanishing. Its cities are abandoned, its people scattered, its very writing system forgotten. It's as if an entire civilization just evaporated. The news is so catastrophic, it's difficult to comprehend. Imagine waking up tomorrow to find that all of Europe had simply disappeared from the map, leaving behind only ruins and whispers. Historians still argue about what exactly caused this widespread cataclysm, known today as the Late Bronze Age collapse. Was it a perfect storm of climate change, mass migrations of these mysterious sea peoples, and systemic economic failure? Or did one trigger the others in a domino effect of destruction? For you, living through it, there are no neat academic theories. There is only fear and confusion. The world you have known your entire life, the world of predictable powers and established borders, is being erased. Assyria, shielded by its inland position, is not destroyed, but it is deeply wounded. The kingdom is forced to contract, pulling its forces back to defend the homeland. The western territories, won at such cost, are abandoned to waves of Aramean tribesmen who pour out of the Syrian desert, themselves likely pushed onward by the drought and chaos. Your world shrinks back to the riverbank where it all began. Life becomes harder, more precarious. The grand international ambitions are forgotten, replaced by the grim, daily struggle for survival. You spend your final years in a darker, poorer, and much more violent world. The art is less refined, the buildings are less grand, and the future is a terrifying blank. But unlike so many others, Assyria endures. It bends, but it does not break. It survives the long night, holding on to the memory of its former strength, nursing a grievance against the chaotic world that took it all away. And in the darkness of this collapsed world, a new, harder, and far more ruthless Assyria is quietly gathering its strength. The long night of the Bronze Age collapse eventually gives way to a gray, uncertain dawn. Centuries pass. The world you are born into is nothing like the cosmopolitan, interconnected world of your ancestors. It is a fractured landscape of petty kingdoms and fortified towns, a place where the primary concern is the integrity of your city walls and the loyalty of your immediate neighbors. Assyria is still here, still clinging to its heartland around Ashur, but it is a shadow of its former self. It's a regional bully, perhaps, but no longer a great power. The kings who rule are often weak, beholden to a powerful and entrenched nobility, families who have grown rich and influential in the vacuum left by the collapse of central authority. You grow up hearing stories of the old days, of the great king Ashurublit and the brief flicker of empire, and it all sounds like a myth, a bedtime story about a forgotten age. Then, around 745 BCE, the story changes. The throne is seized by a man who is, by all accounts, a usurper. He takes the throne named Tiglath-Pileser III, a name deliberately chosen to echo the great kings of the past. But he is not interested in merely echoing the past. He is here to incinerate it and build something new from the ashes. He is the visionary, the reformer, the man who will take the smoldering embers of Assyria and forge them into the iron fist of a true empire. At first, you and your neighbors are skeptical. Another king, another power struggle. But it soon becomes clear that TP3, as you might cheekily call him, is playing a completely different game. His first move is not against a foreign enemy, but against his own people. He targets the powerful nobles, the ones who command vast personal estates and can raise their own private armies. He sees them not as pillars of the state, but as a threat to his absolute power. In a sweeping administrative overhaul, he breaks up their large, hereditary provinces into smaller districts. He then installs new governors who are not powerful local lords, but career administrators, often eunuchs, who owe their position, their wealth, and their very lives to him and him alone. Historians still debate whether this was primarily a move to secure his own political power or a necessary step to create a more efficient war-making state. From your perspective, it feels like a corporate restructuring, but with a much higher chance of getting executed for poor performance. The result is a streamlined, centralized bureaucracy where all lines of authority lead directly back to the palace. With the home front secure, Tiglath-Pileser turns his attention to the army. And here, he does something truly revolutionary. For centuries, warfare had been a seasonal affair. An army was a levy. The massive farmers cooled up after the spring, planting to campaign through the summer, and sent home in time for the autumn harvest. TP3 looks at this model and sees its inherent weakness. He abolishes it. In its place, he creates something the world has never truly seen before. A standing, professional army. These are not farmers. They are full-time soldiers. They train year-round. They are paid by the state, and they can campaign in summer's heat or winter's chill. Suddenly, Assyria is no longer bound by the agricultural calendar. The war season is now 12 months long, and what a war machine it is. The forges of Ashur and the other royal cities now glow day and night, churning out weapons on a massive scale. The key ingredient is iron. It's cheaper and far more available than the tin and copper needed for bronze, allowing for the mass production of swords, helmets, and spear points. This new army is a combined arms force of terrifying efficiency. You see disciplined ranks of infantry, their iron-tipped spears forming a bristling hedge of death. You see squadrons of archers, capable of delivering devastating volleys. But the real game-changers are the new elite units. The cumbersome two-man chariots of the past are supplemented and eventually replaced by a far more mobile and flexible cavalry. And for the first time, you see dedicated corps of engineers and sappers, men whose only job is to figure out how to get through, under, or over a city wall. They are the specialists of destruction. A quirky but vital part of this new military complex is the intelligence network. Spies and informants are integrated into the army's structure, providing the king with detailed reports on enemy weaknesses, political divisions, and the layout of fortifications before the first soldier even sets foot on the battlefield. This isn't just warfare, it's a science. The beast has been built. The centralized state can fund it, the forges can arm it, and its professional soldiers can march it anywhere, at any time. The quiet days of just holding on are definitively over. You can feel the change in the very air you breathe. A low hum of potential energy, of a terrible new power about to be unleashed upon a completely unprepared world. The low hum of potential energy you felt has become a deafening roar, and you are now a part of it. Whether by choice, by conscription from a recently pacified territory, or simply because it was the only steady job for a young man with a strong back, you are now a soldier in the Assyrian army. The theoretical war machine Tiglath-Pileser III designed is now your lived reality. The first thing that strikes you is the sheer, overwhelming scale of it all. On the march, the army isn't just a column of soldiers, it's a mobile city. It stretches 4 miles across the plains, a churning river of infantry, cavalry, chariots, and a seemingly endless baggage train of mules, carts, and camp followers. The dusty kick-up can be seen from half a day's journey away, a deliberate announcement of your arrival. It is the first weapon deployed, a rolling cloud of intimidation. Your destination is a city in the foothills of the Zagras Mountains, one that has foolishly decided to withhold its annual tribute. As you arrive and the army makes camp, you witness the second stage of the assault, and it involves no weapons at all. It is pure theater. The camp is laid out with geometric precision, a stark, orderly contrast to the chaotic jumble of a typical walled city. Patrols move with unnerving discipline. It's a message to the defenders watching from their walls. We are order. You are chaos. We are inevitable. Then, the heralds approach the city gates under a flag of truce. Their offer is simple, brutal, and public. Surrender now. Open your gates, and the king in his mercy will merely double your tribute and execute your treacherous leaders. Resist, and every man, woman, and child within these walls will face the divine wrath of the god Ashur, a wrath that will be delivered personally by the men currently setting up camp. This is the core of Assyrian psychological warfare. Historians still argue whether the Assyrians' legendary reputation for cruelty was an intentional propaganda tool designed to make this very choice easier for their enemies, or if it was simply a reflection of the brutal norms of the age. As you watch the city gates remain stubbornly shut, you know the debate is academic. You are about to become an instrument of that cruelty. The king has been defied. There will be no mercy now. The next few days are a whirlwind of disciplined, terrifying activity. You are assigned to a unit of engineers, and your task is to help assemble the beast. The Siege Tower, it's a masterpiece of military engineering. A wooden monstrosity on 6 massive wheels, taller than the city walls themselves. It is covered in wet leather hides, constantly soaked by men with buckets, to protect it from the flaming arrows that will inevitably rain down upon it. It is a multi-level engine of destruction. At its base, protected by its armored bulk, is a massive battering ram, a sharpened log of oak capped with iron. Higher up are platforms for archers, allowing them to shoot down onto the defenders on the walls. And at the very top is a hinged assault bridge, ready to drop onto the battlements and disgorge elite infantry into the heart of the city's defenses. The assault begins with a deafening blast of trumpets. Your tower begins its slow, creaking advance towards the wall, a wooden god of death inching forward under a sky thick with arrows. The noise is a physical thing, the thud of arrows hitting your leather shielding, the shouts of your commanders, the defiance screams from the walls, and the rhythmic, sickening crunch of the battering ram as it begins its work. Elsewhere, other rams, in armored sheds, looking like giant tortoises, are pounding away at other sections of the wall. At the same time, you know that sappers are in tunnels beneath your feet, digging away at the foundations of the wall, ready to collapse a whole section from below. Every possible avenue of attack is being exploited at once. Eventually, there's a splintering crash and a roar of triumph. The main gate has been breached. The assault bridge on your tower slams down, and the infantry pours across. The battle for the city is short and savage. What follows is not chaos, but a methodical, organized dismantling of a society. The city is looted, its treasures cataloged and sent back to the capital. Its people are rounded up, their fates decided by scribes. As a final, horrifying warning to any other city that might be thinking of rebellion, the captured governor is publicly flayed. It's a grim and visceral piece of political messaging, a testament to the price of defiance. You stand in the smoldering ruins of a once proud city, no longer just a merchant's descendant or a farmer's son. You are a cog in the most efficient machine of conquest the world has ever known. The stench of smoke and death eventually fades from the ruined city, replaced by the dry, familiar scent of dust and clay. The main army moves on, a relentless tide of conquest flowing toward the next defiant kingdom. But you are part of the contingent left behind, the garrison force tasked with a second, quieter, and arguably more important phase of empire building. Turning this smoldering wreck into a functioning, tax-paying Assyrian province. You trade your spear for a hammer or a foreman's rod, putting captured locales to work, clearing rubble and rebuilding the shattered walls. This isn't an act of kindness, it's a practical necessity. The city must be made defensible again, not for its original inhabitants, but for its new Assyrian masters. Soon, the administrators arrive from the capital. They are a different breed from the grizzled army commanders. They are clean-shaven, well-fed men, often eunuchs, whose battlefield is a clay tablet and whose weapon is a stylus. They move with an unnerving air of quiet authority, the absolute embodiment of the king's will. The conquered territories formally designated a province. A governor is installed, a man who, as you learn back home, has no local family ties, no hereditary lands to give him a power base of his own. His loyalty is not to this place or its people. It is singular and absolute, directed back to the king in the capital. He is the king's long shadow in physical form. You watch as the scribes get to work, and you realize that conquest by the sword is followed by conquest by the census. These men are obsessed with lists. They fan out across the countryside, counting everything. Every field is measured, its potential yield calculated. Every olive grove, every herd of sheep, every craftsman's workshop is noted down on a tablet. Even the people themselves are catalogued, sorted by profession and status. This is the foundation of the entire imperial system. A relentless, brutally efficient accounting of every single resource that can be taxed, confiscated, or conscripted. You thought the siege was terrifying, but there is a special kind of cold dread in watching a scribe calculate the precise amount of your future grain production that now belongs to a distant king you will never meet. This vast administrative machine is held together by an equally impressive feat of engineering. The communication network. You see the Royal Road being extended, a highway built and maintained by Corvi labor, designed for one primary purpose: the swift movement of official messages and troops. Along this road, at regular intervals, are small waste. This is the heart of the Kaliu, the Assyrian Express mail service. A rider carrying a royal decree will gallop at full speed from one station to the next, where a fresh horse and rider are waiting to continue the journey without a moment's delay. A message can travel from the farthest reaches of the empire to the capital in a week, a speed that is simply unthinkable to the average person. It is the nervous system of the empire, allowing the king to respond to a potential rebellion before it can even gather steam. But the king doesn't just rely on his governor's reports. You learn about the secret network, the spies and informants known as the King's Ear. They are everywhere. They could be the disgruntled local merchant you share a drink with, the traveling musician passing through town, or even one of your fellow soldiers. They send their own reports back to the capital, a constant stream of intelligence that ensures the king knows what's happening on the ground, and more importantly, ensures his governors are not skimming too much off the top or plotting their own rise to power. It's a system of institutionalized paranoia, designed to keep everyone in a state of low-level fear and absolute loyalty. Historians still debate the formal structure of this intelligence service, but its effects are undeniable. No one feels truly unwatched. You notice a quirky linguistic shift. While the official decrees and monumental inscriptions are all written in the complex Akkadian cuneiform, the day-to-day chatter of the bureaucracy is increasingly in Aramaic. It's a simpler alphabetic script, written with ink on parchment or pottery shards. It's the language of commerce and administration across the Near East. The empire, in its pragmatism, is adopting the most efficient tool for the job. You are standing at a pivotal moment, watching the slow shift from the ancient, cumbersome script of Mesopotamia to the one that will eventually dominate the region for centuries. The king's shadow is long, not just because of the army that casts it, but because of the vast, unseen framework of governors, scribes, spies, and couriers who work tirelessly in the background, turning brutal conquest into sustainable, profitable, and ruthlessly controlled imperial rule. The work of rebuilding the garrison town is complete, and a semblance of grim normalcy is returned. The fields are being tilled, taxes are being collected, and the royal road hums with official traffic. You assume your posting here is permanent, a quiet life enforcing the will of Ashur on a sullen but subdued population. You are wrong. One morning, a royal herald arrives, his horse lathered from the royal road. He unrolls a scroll and reads a decree that sends a ripple of shock and confusion through the assembled population. This entire region, its population deemed untrustworthy and its loyalty suspect, is to be deported. Every man, woman, and child. You are not to be a guard in their homeland. You are to be their escort on a long, brutal journey to the other side of the empire. This is the infamous Assyrian policy of mass deportation, a tool of social engineering on a scale the world has never seen before. It is a terrifyingly logical, if heartless, solution to the perennial problem of rebellion. A people torn from their ancestral lands, from the graves of their fathers and the temples of their gods, are far less likely to organize and resist. Their entire social fabric is They are atomized, demoralized, and utterly dependent on their new Assyrian masters. Your job is to make this happen. You go from house to house, your spear now a tool of eviction, forcing families to gather what few possessions they can carry. The air fills with the sounds of weeping and a despair so profound it feels like a physical weight. You are not just moving people, you are unmaking a culture. The journey begins. It is a trail of tears, stretching for hundreds of miles. You march them on foot, a slow-moving river of human misery, flanked by Assyrian soldiers. The elderly and the very young fall by the wayside. Food and water are brutally rationed. Any sign of defiance is met with a swift, public, and lethal response. This isn't a battle. There is no glory here. It is a logistical nightmare managed with cold-blooded efficiency. Scribes ride alongside the column, constantly updating their lists, counting their human cargo as if they were heads of cattle. You realize this is the census in motion, a terrifyingly literal accounting of the king's property. Historians still argue about the sheer numbers involved. The Assyrians' own records boast of deporting hundreds of thousands, even millions of people over the centuries of their dominance. While these figures may be exaggerated for propaganda purposes, the archaeological evidence of sudden cultural shifts in abandoned settlements confirms that this was a policy enacted on a massive scale. It was the state's ultimate weapon of control. After weeks of travel, you arrive at your destination, a newly conquered and now sparsely populated region in the marshes of southern Babylonia. The landscape is alien to your charge's flat, wet, and humid, a world away from their dry, hilly homeland. They are given plots of land, tools, and seed grain. Their new purpose is simple: to farm this new land, to produce a surplus, and to pay their taxes to the king. But they are not alone. You see other columns of deportees arriving from other corners of the empire. Israelites, Phoenicians, all deliberately mixed together. They don't share a common language, common gods, or common customs. They are a shattered mosaic of cultures, intentionally jumbled to prevent any sense of solidarity from forming. A quirky and tragic side effect of this policy is the creation of a new, blended imperial culture. As these groups are forced to live and work together, they begin to adopt the simple Aramaic language as a lingua franca, the very language you saw the administrators using. The Assyrians, in their effort to destroy individual cultures, are accidentally creating the foundations of a new, more widespread one. And just as your group of deportees is being settled, you see another group being marched out of a nearby town. They are Babylonians, and they are being sent to repopulate the now empty lands you just marched from. It's a breathtakingly cynical population exchange. The empire is not just a collection of territories, it is a human chessboard, and the king is moving the pieces at will, erasing identities and creating a new, homogenized class of imperial subjects whose only loyalty is to the state that holds the power of life and death over them. You stand guard in this strange new land, surrounded by the displaced and the broken, a witness to the profound, soul-crushing reality of how the Assyrian superpower was not just built, but populated. Your long, grim service in the muddy fields of the south does not go unnoticed. Your record is one of quiet, brutal efficiency, and for that, you are rewarded. You receive a transfer, a promotion of sorts, to the very heart of the beast, the capital. Depending on the century, this might be the ancient, holy city of Ashur, the grand project of Dosharkin, or the most magnificent city of its age, Nineveh. Let's place you there, under the reign of a king like Sennacherib, or Ashurbanipal. When Tacitia's splendor was absolute, your journey north is a journey towards the center of gravity. The royal road becomes wider, better maintained. The traffic grows thicker. You pass caravans laden not with humble grain, but with cedar from Lebanon, ivory from Egypt, and fine horses from the mountains. You are swimming upstream, following the flow of the world's wealth to its final destination. When you finally see Nineveh, it takes your breath away. The city is a sprawling metropolis, protected by a double wall, nearly 8 miles in circumference. Its main gates are vast, imposing structures, flanked by colossal stone statues of Lamasa mythical guardians with the body of a bull, the wings of an eagle, and the stern, bearded face of a king. Their unblinking gaze is the first piece of royal propaganda you encounter, a clear message to all who enter. This place is protected by forces beyond your comprehension. You are a soldier, a veteran of sieges, but you look at these fortifications and know, with absolute certainty, that no army on earth could take this city. Your new post is as a palace guard. It is a life of immense prestige and crushing boredom. You spend countless hours standing at attention in the echoing halls and vast courtyards of the palace, without a rival. And as you stand there, you have nothing to do but look at the walls. And the walls are telling a story. Every available surface is covered in exquisitely carved stone reliefs, a continuous, miles-long narrative of Assyrian power. It's like being forced to watch the same political ad on a loop for your entire shift. You see your own life reflected in the stone. There are scenes of the army on the march, of siege towers grinding against city walls, of the flayed governor you witnessed years ago. There are the long, sorrowful lines of deportees, a hauntingly familiar sight. And there are endless processions of defeated kings bowing before the Assyrian monarch, and lines of tribute-bearers carrying the very goods you saw on the road. It's a highlight reel of imperial dominance, a permanent record designed to awe and intimidate every diplomat, vassal, and petitioner who walks these halls. Sometimes you are stationed near the banquet hall. The doors swing open and you are hit by a wave of sound and smell. You hear the pluck of a lyre and the beat of a drum, and you smell roasting gazelle, honeyed cakes, and exotic spices you can't even name. You glimpse the king and his courtiers reclining on ivory couches, drinking wine from golden cups. Display of wealth so obscene it barely seems real. It is a performance of prosperity, a demonstration that the empire's plunder has a very pleasant final destination. On your off-duty hours, you are allowed to wander certain parts of the royal complex. You discover the king's private parks, and they are a wonder. It is here that the king has created a microcosm of his empire. He has gathered exotic plants and trees from every conquered land. Cretan, lush irrigated botanical gardens that defy the harsh Mesopotamian climate. You see strange animals roaming in enclosures, gazelles, deer, and even, it is rumored, a lion, or two, brought back as living tribute. This isn't just a zoo, it's a statement. The king's power is so absolute that he can not only command armies of men, but also master the natural world itself, collecting and reorganizing it to suit his pleasure. One day, the entire palace is abuzz with excitement. The king is to conduct a royal lion hunt, but this is not a trek into the wilderness. It is a highly organized, heavily ritualized spectacle held in a massive and close-knit park. You are part of the cordon of soldiers forming a wall of shields around the arena. Servants opened cages, releasing lions that had been captured and kept for this very purpose. The king, in his chariot, then enters the arena to hunt. He dispatches the powerful animals with arrows and a spear, a display of martial prowess and effortless courage. Historians still argue whether this was a religious ritual symbolizing the king's role as the protector of order against the forces of chaos represented by the wild lion, a piece of pure political theater for his nobles, or simply the ancient world's most dangerous and expensive spectator sport. As you watch the king stand victorious over the slain beast, you know it's all of the above. It is the perfect, bloody metaphor for the Assyrian state, a carefully staged, ruthlessly efficient, an utterly spectacular display of power over a wild world that has been caged and brought to heel. The spectacle of the lion hunt, with its choreographed violence and royal machismo, fades from the palace's daily routine. You return to your post, standing guard in the quiet, cavernous halls. But your perspective has shifted. You've seen the raw physical power of the king, but now you start to notice the deeper, more subtle power that permeates this place. It's in the symbols carved above every doorway, in the chants you hear echoing from the temple complexes, and in the strange, silent work being done in a secluded wing of the palace. You are beginning to understand the software that runs the hardware of the Assyrian war machine. At the center of it all is the god Ashur. You remember his name from your earliest childhood, back when he was just the patron deity of a single city on the Tigris. But here, in the heart of the empire, he has become something far grander. His symbol is everywhere, a winged disc often containing the figure of a bearded god drawing a bow. It's the feathered crown of a divine king. The priests and scribes have painstakingly rewritten the Mesopotamian creation myths, editing the old Babylonian stories to place Ashur at the top of the divine pyramid. The great god Marduk of Babylon is no longer the king of the gods. He's now just a subordinate. It's a theological coup d'etat, a divine justification for Assyria's earthly dominance. This elevation of Ashur has profound implications. The king is not just a king. He is the high priest of Ashur, the indispensable link between the human and divine realms, and the god's primary command, his divine and unceasing mandate, is to expand his dominion. Every campaign you ever marched on, every city you helped besiege, was not just a political or economic act, it was a holy war. The army was not merely an army, it was the instrument of Ashur's. Well, the tribute gathered from conquered lands was not just wealth. It was an offering to the god. This ideology is the engine of perpetual conquest. There can never be a final peace, because the god's domain is not yet universal. The world must be brought into order, and that order is the rule of Ashur and his chosen king. It's a brilliantly effective piece of state theology, transforming endless, grinding warfare from a grim necessity into a sacred duty. One day, your rotation takes you to a new section of the palace, a place you've never seen before. It's quieter here, with a dry, papery smell. You are guarding the library of King Ashurbanipal. This isn't just a few shelves of scrolls. It's a vast, meticulously organized archive containing tens of thousands of clay tablets. You see scribes everywhere, their styluses moving with practiced speed, copying ancient texts from Babylon, Sumer, and Akkad. The king has sent them to the far corners of his empire with a specific mission: to find, confiscate, and copy every important piece of writing in existence, and bring it back to. You peek into one of the archive rooms. The tablets are arranged on shelves by subject, like a modern library, each with a small clay tag identifying its contents. You learn that the king is collecting everything: history, medicine, mathematics, law, mythology. You hear a scribe muttering as he copies a section of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the great Mesopotamian story of a hero who searches for immortality. But the king's real obsession, you discover, is with omen texts. A huge portion of the library is dedicated to texts that explain how to divine the future from literally everything. There are tablets detailing the meaning of a sheep's liver looking a certain way, the patterns of smoke from a censer, the flight paths of birds, even the meaning of a stray dog wandering into a temple. It's an all-consuming effort to catalog every possible sign from the gods, to leave nothing to chance. Historians still argue whether Ashurbanipal's library was a genuine intellectual pursuit, born of a scholar king's curiosity, or a pragmatic tool of empire away to collect and control the accumulated knowledge and spiritual power of his subjects. As you watch a scribe carefully copy an 1,000-year-old Babylonian tablet listing curses to be used against an enemy, it feels very much like the latter. This library is not just a collection of stories. It is an arsenal of information. It holds the religious secrets, the medical knowledge, and the legal precedents of the entire known world. The Assyrian king sought to control not just the bodies and the wealth of his enemies, but their very history and their access to the divine. Standing guard in the silent, dusty corridors, you realize you are guarding a weapon just as powerful as the siege towers you once helped build. Your time guarding the silent library comes to an end. You are reassigned, moved from the world of ideas and omens, back to the world of tangible things. Your new post is at one of Nineveh's main commercial gates, a place where the artery of the royal road pumps the wealth of the world directly into the city's heart. Here, you don't just see the abstract results of empire. You see the empire's daily bread, its lifeblood, arriving in a dusty, endless caravan. The air buzzes with a dozen languages, the braying of donkeys, the creak of overloaded wagon wheels, and the sharp, authoritative commands of Assyrian officials. One day, a great procession is scheduled to arrive. You are part of the honor guard lining the street, your armor polished to a blinding sheen, your spear held ramrod straight. A ripple of anticipation runs through the crowd. This isn't a common tax delivery. This is a formal tribute presentation from a vassal king, the ruler of a Phoenician city-state on the distant Mediterranean coast. He has come to personally reaffirm his loyalty and deliver his annual gift. The procession is a masterpiece of political theater. First come the porters, groaning under the weight of massive cedar logs, destined for the roof of a new temple. Then come men carefully balancing bolts of the legendary Tyrian purple cloth, a dye so rare its value is almost equal to that of gold. They are followed by artisans carrying chests of exquisitely carved ivory furniture. And then, the main event. A long line of servants hauling sacks heavy with gold and silver. The Phoenician king himself rides in a modest chariot, his face a carefully constructed mask of cheerful submission. You watch him, and you see the truth of the system. He gets to keep his throne, his local customs, and a measure of his city's wealth. And in return, he becomes a willing cog in the Assyrian economic machine. It's the protection money paid by states who know the alternative is a visit from the siege towers. It's irregular, flashy, and full of the exotic luxuries the Assyrian heartland cannot produce itself. But this spectacular display isn't what pays your salary. Your wages, the grain that feeds the army, the iron that forges its weapons, that comes from a much more mundane and much more relentless source. Every other day, you see the other caravans, the ones no one turns out to watch. These are the tax convoys from the provinces, the lands under direct Assyrian rule. This is Madatu. It is the systematic, non-negotiable transfer of a province's core production to the state. You see wagons piled high with sacks of wheat and barley from the fertile fields of Syria, jars of wine and olive oil from the hills of Samaria, and rough cast ingots of silver from provincial treasuries. Scribes with clipboards, or rather, clay tablet, check every item against their meticulous records. You get a close-up look at their methods. You see a tax inspector argue with a village elder, unrolling a worn rope. It's an ashlu, a standardized length of rope used to measure fields. The scribe is demonstrating, with geometric finality, that the village's declared harvest is too low for the amount of land they possess. The argument is over before it begins. The empire runs on this kind of grinding, mathematical precision. Historians still argue whether this economic system was purely parasitic, a massive wealth pump that drained the life from its subjects, or if it created a form of forced economic integration, where the stability imposed by Assyrian ruled the safety of the royal roads, the standardized weights, and measures allowed for a different, if less free, kind of prosperity. You watch the goods being offloaded and taken to vast state-owned Tibitgate, or House of Hands, a combination treasury, warehouse, and workshop. Here, the raw materials are processed and redistributed. The grain becomes rations for soldiers like you and for the thousands of laborers building the king's new canal. The silver is melted down and stamped, ready to pay the wages of the palace bureaucracy. The cedar logs are hauled to the construction site of the Temple of Nabu. You finally understand. The entire magnificent, terrifying edifice of the Assyrian state, the army, the palaces, the rituals, the libraries, a furnace, and this constant, ceaseless flow of tribute and taxes is the fuel. Without it, the fires would go out in an instant. Your job, as a soldier and a guard, is not just to conquer, but to ensure that the fuel keeps flowing forever. The grand processions of tribute and the grinding caravans of taxes are the background noise of your life now, not the main event. You have a small, narrow house of your own in a residential quarter of Nineveh, packed tightly against your neighbors in a labyrinth of unpaved alleys. The monumental scale of the palaces and temples is a world away. Here, life is lived at a human, and often cramped, level. The day begins not with a trumpet blast, but with the smell of your neighbor's bread oven and the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a craftsman hammering copper down the street. It's in these alleys, far from the king's stone reliefs, that you truly experience what it means to live in the society that Assyrian power has built. You are an Assyrian citizen, a son of the heartland. This status is the single most important thing you own. It grants you a set of rights and a social standing that are invisible but immensely powerful. You see the difference every day. When you go to the market, you haggle with merchants as an equal, but you also see the deportees, the descendants of the people you once marched across the empire. They live in their own quarters, speak their own languages in hushed tones, and perform much of the city's backbreaking manual labor. They are subjects, but not citizens, a permanent underclass whose presence is a constant reminder of the empire's long and unforgiving memory. Below them are the slaves, some captured in war, others born into it, sometimes marked with a specific haircut or even a brand, a piece of living property. The social pyramid here is steep and unforgiving. This rigid order is enforced by a web of laws that governs every aspect of your life. There is no single, famous code like Hammurabi's, set in stone for all to see. But the king's justice is everywhere. You learn the rules quickly, because the penalties for breaking them are severe. The core principle is retaliation, but it's retaliation with a social hierarchy. An eye for an eye, yes, but the eye of a nobleman is worth far more than the eye of a commoner like you, and your eye is worth more than that of a deportee. Justice is not blind. It is keenly aware of your social standing. You learn this most acutely through the women in your life. Your wife, when she leaves the house, must wear a veil. It is the law. It is a sign of her status as a respectable, married woman under your protection. In these three, you see other veiled women, the wives and daughters of your peers. But you also see the city's prostitutes and female slaves, and by law, they are forbidden from veiling. The penalty for a prostitute veiling herself is 50 lashes and having bitumen poured over her head. It's a quirky and brutally effective system of social signaling enforced by the state. A woman's status and respectability are made instantly, publicly visible. Her identity defined by her relationship to a man. The family is a microcosm of the empire. The father is the Bel Bidi, the lord of the house, with absolute authority over his wife, his children, and his household. Marriage is a contract, a business deal between families, and the penalties for adultery are terrifyingly one-sided. A man who violates another's wife might be forced to pay a fine or suffer a punishment, but the woman herself could be put to death. It's the same principle as the state, a rigid, top-down hierarchy where order is paramount and disobedience is met with overwhelming force. Historians still argue whether the average Assyrian felt oppressed by these strictures or comforted by the profound sense of order and predictability they provided. From your perspective, it's a bit of both. You know your place, and there's a certain security in that, but you also know the penalty for stepping out of it. Sometimes, disputes are brought before a panel of judges at the city gate, a sort of ancient HOA meeting but with much higher stakes. For the most serious crimes, where there are no witnesses, you hear of the old ways still being used. The trial by river ordeal. The accused is thrown into the Tigris. If they sink, the river god has judged them guilty. If they manage to float and survive, they are innocent. It is the ultimate submission to divine will. A reminder that even in this city of grand bureaucracy and military logic, the world is still governed by the caprice of the gods. Life under the God King is a life of rules. There are rules for business, rules for family, rules for how you dress, and rules for how you worship. It is a deeply ordered existence, a society organized with the same ruthless efficiency as the army that built it. The rigid, predictable order of your life in Nineveh, once as solid as the stone Lamassu guarding the gates, begins to feel brittle. It starts with the death of the great king. For decades, he had been the sun in your sky, a figure of seemingly eternal power. The Scholar King, the lion hunter, the master of the world. The news of his passing is met with a vast, choreographed display of public mourning. The temples echo with liturgical wailing, and the palace reliefs are filled with images of his deification. But beneath the official grief, you feel a tremor of profound anxiety. A king's death is always a moment of danger, a crack in the divine order where chaos can seep in. And seep in it does. The succession is not smooth. Ashurbanipal's sons immediately begin to squabble over the throne. The empire, which was held together by the gravity of a single, powerful man, now has two competing centers of power. A vicious civil war erupts. You don't see the great battles, which are fought in the provinces, but you see the ugly symptoms right here in the capital. The palace guard is split into factions. One day you see a commander you know and respect being dragged away in chains, accused of backing the wrong brother. The city, once a unified symbol of power, becomes a nest of rumors, plots, and paranoia. The king's own house is divided against itself, and the whole empire feels the strain. The vultures, naturally, begin to circle. Out in the provinces, the vassal kings and governors who have been chafing under the Assyrian yoke see their golden opportunity. The news that trickles back to Nineveh is not good. A rebellion has broken out in Babylonia, the empire's wealthiest, most populous, and most resentful province. This is nothing new. Babylon has rebelled many times before, and it has always been brutally crushed. The army is dispatched, and everyone expects to hear of another swift, decisive victory to be carved onto the palace walls. But the news that comes back is different this time. The rebel leader, a Chaldean general named Nabopolassar, is not a fool. He avoids a pitched battle. He uses guerrilla tactics, melting away into the southern marshes, only to reappear and strike somewhere else. The mighty Assyrian army, designed for set-piece battles and overwhelming sieges, is bogged down in a frustrating, costly quagmire. For the first time, you hear soldiers returning from the front, not with swagger and plunder, but with exhausted, hollow-eyed expressions, muttering about an unwinnable war. The aura of Assyrian invincibility begins to tarnish. Then you hear whispers of a new threat, a name you've barely heard before: the Medes. They are a confederation of powerful tribes from the Zagros Mountains to the east, the same mountains you marched through as a young soldier. For centuries, they were a fractured, disorganized people, good for raiding, but not for conquest. But now, you hear, they have been united under a single, strong king. They're no longer just a nuisance. They are a kingdom. They begin to push against the Syria's eastern flank, sacking border towns and disrupting trade routes. The empire is now being bled from two directions at once. To counter the growing sense of unease, the state propaganda machine goes into overdrive. You see scribes and stone carvers working furiously on a new section of the palace wall, depicting a recent glorious victory over the Babylonians. But you know the soldiers who fought in that battle, and the story they tell in the beer houses is one of a bloody stalemate, not a triumph. It's a strange and unsettling feeling to be able to see the lie being carved into eternal stone, while the truth is a worried whisper in the alleyways. Historians of a later age will argue endlessly about the precise cause of Assyria's rapid collapse. Was it imperial overstretch? Decades of civil war hollowing out the core? The rise of new, powerful enemies? Or a combination of all these factors? Standing in the market, hearing the price of grain has risen again because another supply convoy from the west was ambushed. You don't need a theory. You can feel the foundations cracking beneath your feet. The empire, which had consumed the world, was now beginning to consume itself. The cracks you felt beneath your feet have become a chasm. The civil wars have ended, but they have left the empire exhausted, a giant bleeding from 1,000 self-inflicted wounds. And now, the unthinkable has happened. The Babylonians under Nabopolassar and the Medes under their king Cyaxares have done what no one thought possible. They have formed an alliance. Their combined armies have swept through the Assyrian heartland, taking city after city. Even the ancient, holy city of Ashur, the cradle of your people, has fallen. Now, the enemy is at the gates of Nineveh itself. The year is 612 BCE. The world you have always known is shrinking to the circumference of these last, supposedly impregnable walls. You are no longer a palace guard. You are a soldier on the battlements. Your back to the magnificent city and your face towards the largest army you have ever seen. The countryside you once knew as a sprawling sea of enemy tents. You look at their siege engines, and a cold, bitter irony settles in your gut. They are Assyrian designs, copies and improvements of the very machines you once used to terrorize the world. The students have learned their lessons all too well, and now they have come to give their final exam. The psychological warfare you once practiced is now being used against you. Heralds shout taunts from beyond arrow range, reminding you that the god Ashur has abandoned you. that the world has come to claim its revenge. The siege is a relentless, grinding horror. Days bleed into weeks. The initial confidence of the city's defenders, a faith in their legendary walls, begins to curdle into a grim, desperate stubbornness. The granaries are still full, but the sheer number of refugees who fled here from the surrounding towns puts a strain on everything. Water is rationed. The constant thud of battering rams becomes the new rhythm of your life, a sound that gets into your bones and haunts your sleep. From your vantage point on the wall, you watch the enemy as if utile assaults, and for a while, it seems like Nineveh might just hold. The walls are too high, the defense is too strong, but the enemy is not the only force at work. The spring rains are unusually heavy that year. The Tigris swells, and its tributary, the river Kosar, which flows right through the city, becomes a raging torrent. One afternoon, there is a deep, groaning sound that is not from a battering ram. A section of the outer wall, near the river, its foundations saturated and weakened by the floodwaters, simply collapses. It's a moment of stunned disbelief. The breach is not made by the hand of man, but by the hand of nature, or as the priests begin to wail, by the hands of angry gods. Panic, a disease that has been kept outside the walls for 2 months, now floods the city. The Babylonians and Medes pour through the breach. The fighting in the streets is savage, a desperate house-to-house struggle, but it is hopeless. The city is too large to defend once the perimeter is broken. You see the great Lamassu, at the gates being defaced, their stone faces, which once projected such serene power, being smashed with slate. You see the palace libraries being put to the torch. The tens of thousands of clay tablets, the collected wisdom and magic of the entire world, are baked hard in the inferno. Ironically, the fire that destroys the palace preserves the tablets for future archaeologists. But for you, it is the end of knowledge. It is the sound of the world's memory turning to ash. You see the king, Sincharishkun, dying amidst the flames of his burning palace, choosing death in the heart of his crumbling empire rather than capture. The mighty have fallen. The center cannot hold. You manage to escape the slaughter, joining a stream of desperate refugees fleeing into the night. You look back one last time at Nineveh, the city that was the heart of the world. It is no longer a city. It is a funeral pyre, a column of smoke and fire reaching for a sky that does not answer. The great Assyrian Empire, the superpower that had endured for centuries, the machine that had ground the world under its heel, has been broken. Its capital wiped from the face of the earth, its people scattered to the four winds. The world, free of its master, breathes a collective sigh of relief. The fire of Nineveh eventually burns itself out, and a profound quiet settles over the ruins, a silence that will last for more than 2,000 years. The story of the great Assyrian kings, of the siege towers and the vast libraries, fades from human memory, becoming little more than a terrifying legend in the pages of other people's histories. The story we have walked through together tonight, your story, is over. The dust of your world settles, and the Tigris River continues its slow, patient journey to the sea, washing away the last traces of blood and ash, carrying the memory of a fallen empire out into the great, quiet ocean of time. And now, here in the comfort of your own room, far removed from the smoke and the shouting, you can feel that same sense of quiet beginning to settle over you. The echoes of marching armies and crumbling walls grow faint, replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing. Let the weight of that ancient world drift away. It is a story that has been over for a very, very long time. Its power now, just a whisper for us to learn from in the safety of a quiet evening. Allow your own thoughts to slow, to soften, to find their own patient journey towards the sea of sleep. There are no walls to defend, no decrees to obey. There is only the gentle pool of rest, the silent promise of a peaceful night. The mighty have fallen, and you can let yourself fall, too, into a deep and untroubled slumber.